The week one slate, guys, it is finally here. We are back to talk through some NFL for this week one main slate over on Draftkings. Going to give you guys kind of a first look at this week one main slate, some plays I like that stand out. We're going to build out a first look lineup, kind of talk through some stacks I like, some GBP correlation, and just kind of talk through the whole lineup building process. So throughout this video, we're going to go position by position, give a very quick breakdown of each position. I don't want this video to be too long, so we're going to give kind of a maybe like 5 minutes per position we'll spend, just highlighting some plays that stand out, some pricing errors. Obviously, recording this video early on in the week. I'm recording this video on Tuesday. We still have 5 more days until the main slate officially starts. Everything that I say in this video, nothing obviously is set in stone. Things can change throughout the week. We don't have any, projections available right now. We don't have any ownership projections available right now. This is all stuff that's just coming from the top of my head. So we're going to give, though, a quick breakdown of this week one slate and what stands out to me taking a first look on Tuesday. Now, before we get started with the breakdown, guys, as always, if you guys enjoy these DFS videos, these DraftKings videos that I post on YouTube, would appreciate it if you would hit that like button down below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you have not yet. We're going to be uploading a lot of DFS content to this channel. We're also going to be giving out player prop picks for those of you that play Prize Picks, Sleeper, a lot of those sites, or even if you bet player props on a sports book. And I do want to give a shout out to Prize Picks because they are the sponsor of this video. Now, if you guys have never heard of Prize Picks, they are running a very cool promo for the week one main slate. Right now, they have Dak Prescott's passing yards set at 0.5. This is a free square that Prize Picks is giving you. All you have to do is take the over on that and then just find any other pair you like to pair with that free square. You do have to make at least 2 picks, but you can make up to 6 picks over on Prize Picks, and you can win up to 25x your money. Prize Picks already has a ton of props available for the week one slate. They got stuff up for Thursday night football, the Chiefs-Lions game. They have a ton of stuff up for the Sunday night or for the Sunday slate of games as well. You can see all the different categories they offer. They have the traditional stuff like passing yards, rushing yards, receiving yards, receptions, but they also have stuff that you don't see a lot of other sports books offering and a lot of other sites offering. They have completions in the first 10 attempts. They have rushing yards in the first 5 attempts. Like, these are new stat types that Prize Picks has added. A ton of stuff you can look at. They offer a ton of different sports as well. And if you guys are not signed up for Prize Picks, as you see on the bottom of the screen, you can actually sign up for Prize Picks and use my promo code NOAH. You will get your first deposit matched up to $100. Be sure to check out Prize Picks if you guys have not yet, and definitely take advantage of that free square that Prize Picks is giving you. That will be available all the way up until Sunday Night Football, so you have plenty of time to get that in. Make sure you are taking advantage of that. But let's go ahead and talk through this week one slate, guys. What stands out to me? We're going to start off at the quarterback position. So I will say for the week one slate, pretty much every year it's always the same. The pricing is going to be pretty soft. There's going to be value, obviously, with guys getting cut, with injuries. They're just going to be value plays available, and we'll talk about those later in the video. So you can kind of spend up at the spots that you like. If quarterback's a spot that you want to spend up this week, it's going to be pretty easy to do so. You can't really say anything negative about the top guys here. You got Lamar Jackson as the most expensive quarterback on the slate at $8K. Really good spot for him at home against the Texans. Obviously, Texans defense, not one to fear. Jalen Hurts kind of in a tougher spot going on the road to face New England, a team that typically has been stout defensively, especially at home. But we've seen the massive fantasy upside that Jalen Hurts has. No issue paying up for him. Justin Fields had a great season last season for fantasy. He finished the season as one of the better fantasy quarterbacks. Spot against Green Bay, I don't love, but at 7,700, you could definitely look to Fields as well. Joe Burrow is going to be an injury to keep an eye on this week. He is currently listed as questionable. We don't have any update yet on Joe Burrow's status. He's listed as day-to-day. Keep an eye on this, just because obviously if Burrow doesn't wind up playing, that's going to be a downgrade for guys like Jamar Chase, for T. Higgins. But Burrow at 7,100 in a matchup against Cleveland in what is expected to be a fairly high-scoring game. I think Burrow stands out as a solid play too. Right now this game, Cincinnati-Cleveland does have the second highest total on the slate, 47.5. So points are expected to be scored in that one. But there's a game that really stands out for the week one main slate, and it's the Chargers and Dolphins. Right now that game has the highest total on the slate, 51. And we got Justin Herbert coming in at 6,900. We got Tua coming in at 6,700. I think both these two guys are going to project pretty well for their salaries. Again, we don't have projections available right now, but I would expect in terms of like points per dollar wise, you're going to see pretty good value scores on both Herbert and Tua. Herbert gets a great matchup here at home against the Dolphins. The Dolphins last season gave up the second most fantasy points per or DraftKings points per game to quarterbacks. So it's a really good spot for Herbert. And if we're playing, if we're looking at Justin Herbert here, we kind of know where to stack him with. If, in a scenario where Justin Herbert winds up being a very high scoring quarterback this week, if he winds up putting, let's say, 28, 39, or 29, 30 DraftKings points, if Herbert has one of those GBP winning type scores, that probably means either Mike Williams or Keenan Allen or maybe Austin Eckler is putting up a really good game as well. So Herbert really stands out to me here in a great matchup against Miami. I like him quite a bit this week as kind of a first look option, and we'll look at some stacking options with him as well. I mean, if you're going to be playing Herbert and GBPs, you almost certainly want to stack him. You almost certainly want to stack anytime you're playing a quarterback in GBPs, unless it's a guy like Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts is one of those rushing quarterbacks that can get it done with their legs. Besides those guys, that's like the rare exception. You almost always want to be stacking your quarterback with his wide receivers or pass catchers, whoever it may be, in GBP. So if we're looking to stack up Justin Herbert this week with one of his pass catchers or multiple pass catchers, I mean, you got Keenan Allen at 7,300. Mike Williams is super cheap at 5,700. You could go to Gerald Everett as a cheap tight end option at 4,300. And on the rare, there's a rare exception here with Austin Eckler. I typically almost never play quarterbacks with their running backs, but this is obviously a scenario where Eckler, a guy that's heavily involved in the passing game, we've seen plenty of weeks where Justin Herbert has a great game and Austin Eckler also has a great game because Eckler can catch multiple touchdowns. So you could obviously pair Herbert with Eckler if you wanted to, but I'm definitely looking at Keenan Allen and Mike Williams here as stacking options with Herbert, and I think both guys look pretty solid. You could double stack, you could just pick one of the two. I like double stacking though, and we're going to talk about some correlation, looking at some run back options, but stacking up Mike Williams and Keenan Allen still leaves us some salary to work with, and we'll be able to find some value plays throughout this video. But that's kind of where I want to start our lineup with, is a double stack Herbert with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Now, other quarterbacks you could be playing on this slate, there's definitely some other options that do stand out. I think Deshaun Watson at 6K at home against Cincinnati, again, in what is expected to be a high-scoring game. Deshaun Watson definitely looks like a solid play here. Watson was a little bit underwhelming last season in the games that he did play, but I would expect a much better year from him this season. He obviously had a full offseason to get ready to prepare for this season, so at 6K, definitely like Deshaun Watson. And then if you're talking about some value plays at quarterback, there's obviously all these rookies, Anthony Richardson, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud. You could look to these guys. I think in terms of like matchup, I think Bryce Young might be in the best matchup facing the Falcons. Falcons were a pretty weak defense last season. They've been a pretty weak defense just kind of the past few seasons. And Bryce Young did look pretty solid in the preseason. I didn't pay attention a ton during the preseason, but I know when Young did play, he did look pretty good. He's one of those guys that you could stack up with like an Adam Thielen, who's obviously a new addition for Carolina. You could stack him up with Thielen if you wanted to be really contrarian in GBPs. That's a stack I would expect to be very low owned. But again, guys, we talked about how much value there is on this slate. I don't think you really need to go cheap at quarterback. There's options down here, but I'm liking a lot of the top guys, and especially that Miami Chargers game looks really good. Justin Herbert definitely stands out as a strong quarterback option to me this week. Now, looking at the running back position, this is where we can find some value this week that we'll talk about. When you're looking at the top guys, though, it's hard to say anything negative about these top guys. I mean, Christian McCaffrey, massive role, massive usage. The matchup on the road against Pittsburgh is probably not the best, but McCaffrey at this point is a matchup-proof running back. Austin Eckler obviously gets a pretty good matchup here, a pretty good game environment against Miami, and we kind of talked about how you can stack him up with Herbert if you wanted to. I typically don't do that, but I think Eckler is a rare exception. Since we already have Keenan Allen and Mike Williams stacked up with Herbert, probably doesn't make a lot of sense to play Eckler in this lineup as well. But Nick Chubb is someone I'm kind of high on this year. He's going to have a really big workload, I'd assume. No Kareem Hunt anymore in Cleveland. His competition for touches is very, very minimal. There's not a ton of guys in that Cleveland backfield that you expect to take touches away from Nick Chubb. So Nick Chubb's going to have a massive role, massive usage at 8,200. I do expect him to be fairly low owned at this price tag. I think people they're going to be a lot more likely to pay up for CMC or Eckler or just go cheaper at running back. Some of these other guys in the mid-range don't really stand out a ton to me. Like Bijan Robinson, very interestingly, is 8K. I was expecting him to be pretty cheap, but he is 8K. Going to be tough to pay 8K for Bijan Robinson, even though he is expected to have a pretty big role in Atlanta. There's guys you could go to in GBPs like a Derrick Henry, Travis Etienne, obviously you could look to. But I'm looking a little bit cheaper, and there's some cheap running backs in play this week that really stand out. So we're looking at some guys in this like 5K range. Obviously, there's some situations. We'll start off with New Orleans. No Alvin Kamara to start the season. He's going to be suspended. So that leaves Jamal Williams as kind of like I would say the early down running back and maybe even a guy that's going to get some usage in the passing game. You look at his competition for touches behind him. I mean, Tony Jones has kind of been he's been with the Saints for a while. He's kind of been just, a backup his whole career. He's never really been a guy that has demanded a large workload. So I do expect there to be a pretty, big amount of volume here for Jamal Williams. Now, the matchup against Tennessee is pretty terrible. Tennessee has always been very stout against the run. The way you beat this Tennessee team is through the air. At least the past few seasons, that's how it's been. But I do expect Jamal Williams to get a lot of volume, and he's only 5,100. So I think he looks like a pretty good value play this week at the running back position. And then I do want to talk about the Colts situation as well. So the Colts, obviously, with Jamal or Jonathan Taylor right now, just not playing, sitting out, and Zach Moss, not looking like he's going to play for Week 1 either. That pretty much leaves Deion Jackson as the lead running back for the Colts. I do expect they're going to involve this rookie Evan Hull. I don't know much about this guy, but he should probably be the backup running back. But we've seen Deion Jackson be able to handle a large workload when given opportunity. He's had games last year where he was the RB1 and he was able to get 12, 13, 14 carries. He's a guy that can get a lot of usage in the passing game as well. Now, Anthony Richardson, how much is he going to target his running backs in the passing game? I guess that's to be determined. When Matt Ryan was on the Colts, Matt Ryan would always dump it down to the running backs. Deion Jackson, I know he had 1 week, I think it was this week against Jacksonville, with Matt Ryan where he got 10 catches for 79 yards. Don't expect that type of volume in the passing game, but Deion Jackson has shown the ability to be a workhorse running back, and I expect he's going to have a pretty big role right out of the gate just because there is no Zach Moss, it looks like, and Jonathan Taylor is not playing right now. So as a value option at 4,100, damn near minimum salary, really looking at Deion Jackson this week as a value running back. He's probably going to be a pretty popular play, but we can find ways to get different. I mean, it's a 13-game slate. In GBPs, you can still play Deion Jackson and have a contrarian lineup, have a unique lineup. So I do like him quite a bit as a value option at the running back position. There's some other guys down here you could consider for value as well, but Jamal Williams, Deion Jackson, those were the two guys that really stood out to me as cheap options at running back. Even like a Khalil Herbert now, without David Montgomery, Khalil Herbert should have a pretty big role at 5,300. He's another value play that I think looks interesting. But there's some running back plays I'm kind of looking at this week. Again, guys, I can't talk about every single player on the slate, or this video is going to be like 4 hours long. So I kind of have to keep it short and sweet. But that's kind of some early breakdowns of this position. Some guys that do stand out to me. Now let's talk a little bit about wide receiver. Some plays I'm liking at wide receiver. We already have our double stack with Herbert and Keenan Allen, and we're going to probably want to look at a run back here. Anytime, you don't have to, but anytime you are stacking in tournaments, you usually want to play someone on the other side of the game, just because in a scenario where this winds up being like a very high scoring game, that obviously means somebody on the Dolphins side is doing well. And if we're looking at wide receivers, we can look to obviously, or at least wide receivers for the Dolphins, we kind of know who we're going to be looking at here. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, I think both are guys you could look to in your stacks with Justin Herbert. Tyreek Hill's coming in at 8,200. Jalen Waddle's coming in at 7,100. Both these guys look like pretty good plays here, pretty good GBP options. If I had to choose one of the two, I do always typically side with Tyreek Hill. I just think Tyreek Hill has more slate breaking upside. And if there's any receiver that can put up like 45 DraftKings points any week, it's probably Tyreek Hill. I mean, he's had multiple 40-point games throughout his career. He had 45 DK points week 2 against Baltimore last season. He looks like a really good option as a run back option. I'm a little bit worried, though, we're going to be a little bit thin on salary to pay up for Tyreek Hill and to pay up for Jalen Waddle. So we could look at some other run back options on the Miami side, and I didn't talk about him at the running back position, but I want to talk about Raheem Mostert here. So if you look at this Miami running back situation, they don't have a lot of guys you're really worried about taking away touches from Mostert. Jeff Wilson's on the IR, so he's not going to be able to play for this game. And Salvon Ahmed, I mean, he's kind of been in and out of this rotation. He's got touches at time, but he's never really demanded a heavy workload. This Devon Achini guy, I don't know much about him, but doesn't seem like he's going to be a guy that really we expect to take touches away from Raheem Mostert. So I think Raheem Mostert's going to have a pretty big role right out of the gate for this Miami team, and it's a great matchup here against the Chargers. The Chargers last season were a major run funnel. They gave up in terms of fantasy points per game to running backs, the Chargers did give up the 6th most DraftKings points per game to running backs last season. In terms of rushing yards allowed per game, the Chargers gave up the second most rushing yards allowed per game. They were a major run funnel. So it is a great spot here for Raheem Mostert. Mostert has shown the ability to show a lot of upside when given opportunity. He's someone they can use in the passing game. Like, he can handle a heavy workload if he has to. And I wouldn't be surprised to see 16, 17, 18 touches here for Raheem Mostert. I just think his competition for touches is very minimal. I think they're going to really lean on Raheem Mostert here. And at only 5,400 run back, he's a run back option we can use on our Herbert stacks. I like Raheem Mostert quite a bit this week. Obviously, you could go to Tyreek Hill, you could go to Jalen Waddle. I think those guys are going to get a lot of attention, though. I'm not sure how much ownership Raheem Mostert's going to get. So let's plug him in at the running back position. And now we've kind of got our stack built. We've got Justin Herbert double stack with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams run back with Raheem Mostert. And then we have Deion Jackson as our value play. Now let's look at the wide receiver position and see if we can find maybe like a little correlated stack to do. So like a running back and a wide receiver, or a wide receiver and a tight end. And there's some wide receiver plays you could obviously pay up for at the top. Justin Jefferson, going to probably be the fantasy wide receiver one after it's all said and done. He had a great season last season. Don't think anything's going to change this year without Adam Thielen now. I mean, the targets are just going to funnel even more towards Justin Jefferson. Really hard to say anything negative about any of these top guys. I think in terms of pay-up options, if we're just talking about guys with the most upside, my favorite plays at the top are probably Justin Jefferson and Tyreek Hill. But you can't go wrong with Jamar Chase either. Just keep an eye on that Joe Burrow news. Obviously, if Joe Burrow does not play this week, that's a pretty massive downgrade for Jamar Chase. I definitely would not have nearly as much interest in Chase if Burrow wasn't to play. But there's some other guys in the mid-range you could look to as well that definitely look like solid options. If you don't want to pay all the way up for Chase, you got T. Higgins coming in at 6,800. The Denver wide receiver situation is definitely one we do need to talk about. Jerry Jeudy's an injury-prone player that looks like he's injured once again heading into week 1. They haven't put him on the injury reserve, so he's not going to miss like multiple games or anything. But there's no report yet of whether or not he's going to be able to play week 1. And if Jerry Jeudy isn't able to play week 1, that's going to open up a lot of volume for a guy like Courtland Sutton. That's going to open up some opportunity for a rookie like Marvin Mims that you could definitely look at. He's the stone minimum 3K. Sutton, though, at 5,200, especially if Jeudy does not play, is going to be another kind of cheaper value wide receiver you can look to this week that I would definitely have a lot of interest in. Did want to talk about him. This Denver wide receiver situation, they just got a lot of guys out right now. Tim Packer's on IR. Pretty sure they cut KJ Hamler. Obviously, they cut all these other guys. So, yeah, expect a big role for Courtland Sutton, especially if Jerry Jeudy is not able to play come week 1. Did want to talk about Sutton, though. There's some guys in this mid-range, though, that really stand out. Calvin Ridley, someone I do want to talk about here. Calvin Ridley obviously did not play last season. He had that gambling suspension. Then he got traded to the Jaguars. He looked great, though, in the preseason. I know I didn't pay much attention to the preseason, but when Ridley was out there, he showed a lot of connection with Trevor Lawrence, and Ridley has shown the ability to be a stud fantasy wide receiver when healthy. When he was healthy with the Falcons, he was a very good fantasy wide receiver. He demanded a lot of volume, and especially after Julio Jones left, Ridley was a target monster. And I could definitely see that being the case with this Jaguars team. And we already have Deion Jackson in our lineup, so we kind of, not saying we have to correlate someone on the other side of that game, but it makes a lot of sense to correlate our Deion Jackson play with someone on the Jacksonville side. Really someone I like quite a bit this week. You could definitely look to like a Christian Kirk if you wanted to go that route. He's a little bit cheaper. If you want to take a shot on Zay Jones, he's cheap as well. But Ridley is someone that I think is going to have a big year. And at only 6,500, I feel like we are getting a little bit of a discount on Ridley this week. I don't think his price tag is going to remain in the 6K range. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if the rest of the season you see Ridley price 7K and above. So correlating with our Deion Jackson play, I like Calvin Ridley at wide receiver quite a bit this week. And that kind of fills out the wide receiver position. Now, obviously, there's a ton of wide receivers I didn't talk about. Again, guys, if I talk about every single wide receiver on the slate, this video is going to be 4 hours long. So I don't want to do that. But there's definitely some value options down here that look very solid. We talked about Courtland Sutton. Arizona's a tough situation to project this year, but Marquise Brown's only 5,200, and he should have a really big year as kind of like a volume monster for a team that's probably just going to be playing from behind every single week. If Kyler Murray was playing, I would definitely feel a lot better about Marquise Brown, but I still think Marquise Brown's someone you can maybe look to. If we're talking about guys below 5K, you got Odell Beckham making his debut with the Ravens. You could obviously go there as a value option. George Pickens, someone that a lot of people are high on this year to have a breakout year. He's 5K, a guy you could look to for value as well. Adam Thielen, we talked about stacking him up with Bryce Young if you want like a very low-owned contrarian GPP stack. That's one you could look to. You could stack up Young with Thielen and then maybe play like Bijan Robinson or play Kyle Pitts, someone on the other side of that game. That's kind of it, though, for the wide receiver position and kind of the value plays that stand out at first look. Let's talk about tight end, though, talk about defense before we wrap up this video. So, tight end, we've got some salary to spend here. We haven't plugged in a cheap defense yet, and defense is typically a spot I look to go cheap. I don't spend a ton of time on defense. Defense is a very just tough position to predict. It's very volatile. The cheapest defense could be the highest scoring defense on the slate any week. You just never know with defense. It's rarely a position I pay up at just because it is so volatile. I typically like defenses at home just because I think they can feed off the home crowd. One defense that really stood out at first look was the Commanders. They're at home, they're 2,800, and they're going to be facing this just putrid Cardinals team that's going to be probably the worst team in the NFL this season. They're going to be a team that's they're going to have to throw a lot because the Cardinals are going to be playing from behind a ton. And when teams are throwing a lot, that's obviously great for the opposing defense because that means opportunities for sacks, opportunities for strip sacks, opportunities for pick sixes, for interceptions. So the Commanders' defense at 2,800, we'll just plug them in as kind of like our cheap defenses to fill out this lineup. And that leaves us 5,650 for a tight end and a flex. So we've got a lot of ways we could go here. We could pay up at tight end and then go with like a 5K flex. We could go cheap at tight end and then play like a 7K or 8K flex option. When it comes to the tight end position, it's typically a position I do look to go cheap at, but because we have some value this week at other positions, we can spend up here. And Mark Andrews is a guy that I typically like to play when I can just because he has clearly been one of the best fantasy tight ends just throughout his career over the last few seasons. And since we don't have Travis Kelce on the week 1 May slate, our next best option is Mark Andrews when it comes to fantasy upside. Now, Mark Andrews, we don't have any update on his status yet. It seems like he's going to play week 1, but there's reports that they don't want to push it if he's not ready. Obviously, they could rest him. This is a game that Baltimore should pretty easily be able to win. Keep an eye on this situation. If Mark Andrews doesn't play, you're going to get a very, very good value play in Isaiah Likely, who is only 3K. That's going to be a situation to attack regardless. If Andrews is full go, if he's able to play, he's obviously one of the top tight end options. If Andrews doesn't play, then Isaiah Likely is going to become one of the best value plays. I like paying up for Andrews at tight end, just getting that upside. I think he can outscore the next highest tight end by 10, 15 points any week. And we have the salary to get him in. So let's plug in Mark Andrews into our tight end spot. We could obviously go cheap with some other guys. There's plenty of other options you could look at. If you're going cheap, there's a couple of guys that really stand out as values, like Gerald Everett. If you wanted to stack him up with Herbert, since we already have a double stack, I didn't want to play Gerald Everett in this lineup, but I think Gerald Everett is poised to have a good year in a really good offense. He's only 4,300. David Njoku, I think, is poised to have a pretty big year as well with Cleveland. A big body that Cleveland can target in the red zone. There's always touchdown upside for David Njoku. He's only 4,200 as well. Irv Smith is expected to be the number 1 tight end for Cincinnati, and we've seen Irv Smith be a guy that can handle getting 5, 6, 7 targets a game. He has shown the ability to produce when given playing time. He's a good receiving tight end. He's only 3,600. This is one of the better game environments on the slate. Like Irv Smith is another guy you could play for cheap at tight end, and then obviously Isaiah Likely we mentioned in a scenario where Mark Andrews doesn't play. It's going to be hard to get away from Isaiah Likely at only 3K, but I really like paying up for Andrews, especially since we had the salary to do so. Let's plug in Andrews, and that leaves us 5,100 for our flex spot. There's a lot of guys we could play here. We talked about Jamal Williams, who I like quite a bit as a value option. We didn't talk about Michael Thomas, but I think Michael Thomas at 5,100 looks really good here. Obviously, really good matchup for Thomas against Tennessee. We talked about how Tennessee is a lot more vulnerable against the pass than they are against the run. And there's reports that Michael Thomas looks like his old self right now. We'll have to see what kind of connection he has with Derek Carr, but Michael Thomas at 5,100 looks pretty solid. You could obviously go to like Odell, who's going to be probably low owned. You could go to a guy like George Pickens, who I would assume is going to be lower owned. But let's plug in our boy Jamal Williams. We talked about Jamal Williams, how he should have a pretty big role here. He's going to be the lead running back for the Saints. It's not the best matchup, but I think the volume's going to be there. The goal line work, we know Jamal Williams is going to get all the goal line work. He was a goal line machine in terms of scoring touchdowns last year for the Lions. I think in scenarios where they do get near the goal line, it'll probably be Jamal Williams getting those goal line touches. They could obviously go to Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill's always a threat to get those goal line touches as well. But Jamal Williams should have a pretty big role here with Alvin Kamara suspended. And at only 5,100, he stands out as a good value running back this week, at least at first look. So this is kind of our first look lineup, guys. Just an early build, kind of talk through some roster construction, some plays I'm liking. We got our Justin Herbert double stack with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, run back with Raheem Mostert. Then we have a correlated mini stack of Deion Jackson, Calvin Ridley, Mark Andrews as our top tight end play, Jamal Williams as a value running back, and then the Commanders defense at home in a pretty good spot against a bad Arizona team. That's our lineup for this week for our, obviously a first look. Now this is nothing set in stone here, guys. Don't play this lineup in GBPs and expect to win $1 million. That's not how this works. The idea of this video is just to talk through roster construction, talk through some plays that stand out, kind of talk about some stacks we can look to build. But if you guys are going to be playing this week 1 slate, I wish you guys the best of luck. I'm sure if you're watching this video, you're probably going to be playing the week 1 slate. Again, guys, wish you the best of luck. If you're going to be playing Prize Picks this week, some of these DFS pick'em sites, I wish you the best of luck playing those sites as well. Again, if you guys are not on Prize Picks, get over to Prize Picks. We're going to have a ton of content on made for Prize Picks for this NFL season. We'll be uploading Prize Picks videos for the Thursday Night Football games, for the Monday Night Football games, and for the full Sunday slate as well. I should have a Prize Picks video posted for the Thursday Night Football game probably tomorrow on Wednesday. Make sure you're checking that out. And again, guys, if you're not on Prize Picks, you can sign up. You can use promo code NOAH. You'll get your first deposit matched up to $100. And take advantage of that Dak Prescott free square. That is available all the way up until kickoff Thursday night, on Sunday night. So you got plenty of time to get that in. You have all Sunday. If you want to use it for the Thursday night game, you can do that. Or if you want to use the free square for the Sunday slate of games, you have until Sunday night to get it in. So take advantage of that free square that Prize Picks is giving us. Take a look at all the props that Prize Picks has available for this NFL slate. See if there's anything that stands out to you. But that's all that I got for this week 1 slate, guys, for a first look video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. I'm going to be making DFS content all throughout the NFL season. We'll be having DFS videos go up every single week, both for, obviously for the main slate and for the showdown slate. So for Monday Night Football and for Thursday Night Football, we'll be making DFS videos for those. I do already have a Draftkings video posted for the Thursday Night Football game. That video is already up on the channel. If you guys want to go check that out, you can check that out on the channel. But good luck this week, guys. So excited the NFL's back. Excited to be making DFS content again. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hit that like button if you guys enjoyed. Hit that subscribe button if you have not yet. And we will see you guys in the next one. Peace.